Now, just to introduce you to the surveys, let's have a look at some of the aspects of it. The surveys are useful. Surveys, being in the more general term, they include interview questions, or a series of questions that you would ask in an interview. So that's a structured interview, but it includes that. So they're very, very useful in a range of circumstances. At the one end of the scale, we have the self-administered survey. This is the kind of thing where the person responding to it steps through it themselves and they follow their own instructions. Excuse me. This is the kind of thing where it's consumer feedback type survey. Then there is an administered survey, and this is where there is a person asking the questions and somebody answering the questions. So it's administered by the person asking the questions. Morgan Gallup, I think, is fairly famous for these. If you are conducting student research, it's quite likely you will be actually asking the questions as well. Then at the other end of the scale, or the far end of the scale, is the structured interview, where you're asking questions, but it's more an exploration. But the questions aren't bound by either the wording or the number of questions you have. It's an interview. It's structured by and guided by the questions you have, but it's not bound by them. So that's a structured interview. A focus group is a pretty good example of a structured interview. Now, one of the observations about questions and surveys is that question and answer is a fairly basic type of conversation. It's the most common form of conversation. I ask a question, you answer the question. I might ask another question. Sometimes, obviously, you change roles, and some you change questions. But one of the observations, particularly in the faculty in which I work, which is the Faculty of IT, we're famous for having people with low social skills, and people with low social skills do have difficulty with surveys. They're uncomfortable fronting up to a strange person and asking them all sorts of questions. So there are some problems with them. It does assume that your information will come from a number of sources. So with a survey, it's not as if you're going to ask one person and get all the information from that one person. It assumes that you're going to ask a number of people, or there will be a number of different sources of that information. There are some things that surveys can achieve. There are three main ones. You can determine the existence of something. So you can go and ask, I guess one question that I'm likely to do in the near future is I look at the dashboards of various software development projects. I want to know what kind of thing they have in their dashboards. Now, once I know that, then I can go on to the next one. I can measure the amount of something. So if I find that it's quite common in these dashboards to have something measuring progress, I can go and have a look at all the different measures of progress and ask something specific about, well, how much information do you get on the progress of the project? There's that one. And one of the other uses of surveys is to determine relationships between things. Again, going on the example of project dashboards, I could ask whether there's a relationship between specific types of information presented on the dashboard and project overruns or project success or something else to do with the project. So there's relationships between things that you can also get out of a survey. And that's probably about it. Now, the difficulties of surveys is it can be very difficult to check the truth of what somebody's telling you. You ask a question, they answer. How do you know they're telling the truth? Well, you don't, but most people do tell the truth. The biggest difficulty is each person has to decode what you say into something that means something to them. The fact that you've said it, you know what you want to know. You know what you're asking, but the person listening doesn't know that. They interpret what you say in in ways that make sense to them. They then try and answer that question, and in code, they wrap their answer up in the words they want to use and give it to you. Now you've got to try and decode that. So you've got numerous opportunities for misunderstanding, and that's one of the problems of it all. Another problem is, as is pointed out by Peterson quite frequently, if you ask somebody a question, they will answer. They'll give all sorts of contorted answers, but they will answer. People really have difficulty saying, I don't know, or I can't answer. They really will try and answer your question. People are obliging. You ask them a question, they'll try to help. But you know, the answer you get might not be very useful. And again, as is pointed out by Peterson quite frequently, is that questions are only useful insofar as people actually understand what you're asking. So keep in mind what you're asking of who. Now, in summary then, question and answer are a basic form of conversation. So your questionnaire should be, among other things, a conversation. It should be interesting to the participants. There are probably three major objectives for a survey, and that is to determine the existence of something, to measure the amount of something, or to measure the amount of something, or determine the relationships between some things. And the last point to remember, it's difficult to check the truth.